Welcome to the Art of Badassery, where I sit down with remarkable people to explore the moments, the mindsets, and the decisions that shape extraordinary lives. I'm Mahara Wayman, capacity expert and founder of the Capacity Lab, where I help people build the capacity to hold what's next. Let's dive in. Harmony, welcome to the Art of Badassery. I'm so excited to have you on the show. We discovered that we were both connected through Alyssa Nobriega's world. And after our conversation, I knew we had to continue it here because you said something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. You said, in many ways, wellness culture and self-care may actually be making women sicker. But before we jump into that bombshell, tell us a bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm so happy to be here, and it's so beautiful to connect with you again. I started this work in the wellness field, in this field of spirituality and personal development many, many moons ago. I was young and interested in yoga, and when no one else was really interested in yoga except old ladies in unitards. And so I started practicing yoga in my sort of late teens very diligently, which took me and started learning about Buddhism and Buddhist meditation. I did a whole degree in philosophy and religious studies and went to China to meditate and study Buddhism there, and then went to India to study yoga and go deep with yoga there back in the early 2000s. And then that led me to move to Thailand, where I was able to combine both my love for Buddhism and yoga and working in a retreat center, teaching yoga, guiding retreats. And of course, it was like all focused on wellness and health and healing. And so it's been quite the journey to, continue to evolve in my own offerings and my own interests. And see how the world has also changed and evolved. Yeah, you were making like your own plant-based milk. It wasn't a thing. If you were vegetarian, you ate salads when you ate out. Like that, those were the options, especially where I live, which is, above Montana in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta. So it's been quite a fascinating journey to watch the world evolve.
Okay, let me jump in here and ask though, at what point did you realize that people can use healing practices to avoid healing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was probably not early on. I mean, early on, I think I was very naive and also very much immersed in the culture, like a true believer. But as I sort of grew up in this culture, a very deep yoga tradition, a lineage where, everyone was focused on food and, fixing their diet to increase their spiritual practice, and their spiritual practice, their yoga practice was like 2 to 4 hours every day and involved chanting and meditating and yoga asana and the way you ate and when you went to bed. And it was like a whole subculture of very intense yoga practitioners that I was intimately involved with for many decades, that we would all meet in India once a year and, grow from there. And it's an international community. But sort of, I guess after about 10 years of being very immersed in this community, so probably a decade into my own sort of growth or evolution, uh, I started to notice, like, I just don't think this is actually working for some people. And so that was kind of the thing. Like, I think the yoga's working. Like, they're not really growing or changing. They're just using these practices to increase their ego and to make themselves kind of feel better about doing the things that they want to do in the world rather than actually, transforming, allowing the practices to transform who they are in the world, like doing that deeper work of connecting to, your own fears and looking at your dark side, like looking at where are you hiding, where's the ego coming out, like what are you attached to, and like seeing how people would use spiritual practices to make themselves feel like better than other people. That's comes out often, which is like kind of toxic and the opposite of spiritual practice, right? Is it doesn't make you better than other people, and if that's what you think it's doing, then you better look again.
Well, here's the thing, and you bring up, spiritual bypassing is a term that's been, we hear it quite a lot in the business that we're in. But I'm curious, like, what does it actually look like? You mentioned one thing, which I think was kind of cool, sad but true, which is we can use spiritual bypassing to build ourselves up, which, in our world speaks to really a lack of self-worth. But are there any other ways that we recognize that we are falling into that category of spiritual bypassing?
Yeah, I mean, I think often like this idea of like only good thoughts, right? Or only good vibes. So not wanting to look at, like not wanting to feel the sadness or the deep grief, or even look at tragedies in the world and war and injustice. Like all of that stuff is kind of, icky. Like it's dark and it's sad and it should produce anger and it should produce feelings of something's wrong. And so often when you're on this spiritual path, you don't want to like dig into that and really like look for it or even stand up for justice or truth or, you know, like what's right.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because, there's a component to awareness,
Mhm.
which is action, right? In our
Yeah.
there's sort of three stages, and Lissa talks about this and I talk about it a lot in my work, which is awareness, acceptance, aligned action. And
Mhm.
acceptance isn't I'm so happy that I'm miserable. It's just an acceptance, right? It's understanding, it's doing the work. But action is part of that sequence. So why do you think it is that awareness alone isn't enough?
Yeah, I mean, we can be aware of all kinds of things. Like awareness in and of itself, especially when you're looking at sort of the spiritual path and practices in the spiritual path is, awareness is an observation of the breath, say, right? I mean, it can be that simple. Awareness is like just taking in what's in the room without labeling it, without judging it, without making up a story about it, but just being with reality as it is at its most fundamental, basic level. But that doesn't move you anywhere. That creates sort of stillness, which is beautiful and important. But it's important to know where you are before you move.
Very true. I mean, awareness is key, but action is part of that. And this idea of spiritual bypassing, or even, people getting really good at using healing language, but without actually healing, is an example of awareness without action, right? You can say the words, do the things, yoga for 3 hours a day, and still not be any more centered or guided or balanced within your.
Yeah, and I started to notice that like are people just exhausting themselves to the point where they don't have enough energy to actually care about things or actually do like feel motivated to do something about injustice in the world or like people they love, like helping people they love or whatever it is that they're kind of lacking that aligned action on.
Yeah.
you know Sometimes I think we can get so self-absorbed in our own like spiritual development or personal development or spiritual growth that like in a way we're just kind of like using up our vital life energy and then we're feeling exhausted. And when you feel exhausted, it's like, yeah, you're too tired to feel angry. You're too tired to feel sad. You're too tired to like feel motivated to change something about yourself or the world. And so we can say, well, I'm just accepting things as they are, or I'm surrendered. You hear that a lot too, right? I'm surrendered to life as it is. And it's like, yeah, well, yeah, you can say everything's perfect as it is. And yet you can still make changes. That's also part of the perfection.
Yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum, right? Which this idea of everything's happening for a reason. I used to
Mhm.
say that for years. Everything's happening for a reason. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
There's like Sri Shankaracharya, he's a great Advaita Vedanta sage. And Advaita Vedanta is, sort of we're all one, everything's one. There's only one thing that truly exists, and that is, Brahma or consciousness. And people would say, there's this funny story of him running down the street and people watching him running down the street because he's getting chased by a bull. Of course, in India, the cows roam free. So sometimes the bulls act up and like, go after the humans. So he was like running away from a bull that was chasing him in the street. And the people were watching him and laughing and saying, Sri Shankaracharya, everything's an illusion. Why are you running? And he said, my running's an illusion too. And so I always like love that story, because the thing is yeah, everything's perfect as it is, or like everything's fine and you can be surrendered to it, and everything's part of the bigger picture, but your desire to change it is also part of that bigger picture, and your actions to work towards change are also part of that perfection and that bigger picture. It doesn't mean just sitting on your couch or on your meditation cushion and being incapacitated.
Yeah, you still have to live. You still have to do. You still have to try. You still have to question. One of the things that we talked about when we first met was this pressure to always be on. I think a lot of high achieving women will recognize that, and those are the women that I work with mostly. What does that performance pattern look like in your work?
Yeah, I mean, in my work, I mean, for me in particular, uh, it's really like learning, and this is something that I'm still working on and still, trying to, or getting better at implementing, day to day, is just creating boundaries for myself, right? Like creating time where it's just me and I'm not on and I'm not having to, show up for other people. And I think that that's part of this, sort of performance, perfectionism, overgiving, overserving, needing to like be everything for everyone and always be the best. Right. It's sort of like this whole package of like triple A plus personality.
Well, here's the thing that comes up a lot in my work is this question around what does perfectionism, and I put that in air quotes, actually protect? Why do we go there? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the perfectionism is the cover or the defense for feeling deeply insecure, for feeling deeply like you're not enough. And I mean, as from the work that we've both done and been steeped in, is if you really just go into that feeling of like, what does it feel like to truly just feel like you're not enough, and to be with that deep inner wounding. I mean, it's sort of a core wound for probably most of humanity. And just to really be with that part of you, and whether that's tracing it back to the origins, which might be prelingual, which might be the time your mother had to go back to work and left you at daycare and you were like, why am I not enough? Right? Before language, even, you had the language for it, the feeling was there, that frequency, that imprint, that vibrations in your cells, it's in your tissues. And now we have language for it, but it's unconscious mostly. And so we've developed patterns, performance patterns, to cover up for that deep feeling. But when you feel it, it starts to kind of free you from the grip of it, which then starts to unravel or release that perfection pattern. So we have to kind of be courageous, I think, as we're on our personal development or spiritual path, and do that shadow work or that deeper work of feeling and meeting the things that we're scared of, the things that we don't want to admit to others.
But how do we know when we're performing instead of being present? Because it's easy for you and I to sit here and talk about it because this is what we studied and this is what we work with our clients daily. But for our guests that are listening, what can they look out for in their own behavior that may trigger the idea, ooh, I'm not really present in this moment, or this is a real great performance, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's like a feeling of misalignment is sort of the word that's coming up for me, like a bit of a rub. Like maybe you start to feel a little bit resentful about like saying yes to something or having to do something or having to be there for someone. You start to maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable in this situation, or like with your commitments or in your life. I think when you start having those feelings of even anxiety, can be a sign of like it not being a match for you.
I agree 100%. And I think also that, and we talked about the inner critic. I think it's when the inner critic gets really loud, can also be a sign. And you actually mentioned that your inner critic gets loud when you weren't receiving feedback. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, we all have things that we really, yeah, we really like rely upon, and some people rely upon having the world completely sort of organized and in control as much as possible, in order to feel like stable or know sort of what to do in their daily lives. For me, it's more feedback. Like I love getting feedback from people. I don't always love the negative feedback, but at least it helps me to reorient, redirect myself in time and space, or know how to grow, how to be better. And so if I'm like not receiving any feedback, positive or negative, then I feel very like that inner critic comes up, because it's sort of like you obviously you didn't do a good job because you're not receiving any feedback. It's like the worst of the worst.
Have you learned how to ask for feedback? Because most of us don't. It's like, oh my God, it's better safe than sorry, or no news is good news. But we're really
Yeah.
doing ourselves a disservice, right? To your point, if the inner critic just defaults to you suck.
Yeah, it's true. I think, for me, I really used to fear feedback a lot. Like I liked positive feedback, but I also had a bit of a nourishment barrier of not really letting myself receive the positive like feedback, and really like cherish and sit with like the good things. Um and so that's also kind of an interesting pattern, right? If you're not letting yourself receive the positive feedback, it's sort of a protection pattern also for negative feedback, right? Because then you're not letting yourself really receive the negative feedback too. So that was sort of like a whole pattern that has been unwinding as I sort of learned, like, oh, actually I can allow myself to receive the positive feedback and really take it in and own it. And in doing that, it's sort of opened up a little bit more of that capacity to really value feedback and want feedback, and use feedback as a way to grow and to get better or to change something that isn't going well.
Love that you
And
use the word capacity, because I use that a lot in my work. And
yeah,
what I'm hearing is from you here today and from my clients as well is it's such a beautiful opportunity to expand one's capacity for anything. It
yeah,
goes back to what we studied with Alyssa, this idea that we have to sit with our feelings. And at first it's really hard. And oh my God, I can only sit with this for like 30 seconds. And then you build up to the point where you're like, I can sit with this all bloody day. Right. I can allow myself to feel miserable or shame or whatever it is.
yeah,
But that's how we build capacity, right? Capacity to dream, capacity to act, capacity to stay perfectly still. However, whatever the capacity need is in that moment. So thanks for bringing up that word. I want to switch gears slightly and talk about the big thing that I mentioned at the top of the hour, or top of the conversation, which was this idea that self-care is making women sick. I mean,
Mm.
talk about a sentence that had me sitting up straight and closing my mouth because I'm like, what did she just say? So you made the statement that
Mm.
self-care is actually making many women feel worse. You got to tell me more about that.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes to what we've been talking about is, before, when I first started, in this journey, there was, if you were doing yoga, it was sort of like, great. Like for me, it's for my own personal, like, connection to myself, my body, to higher consciousness or God. And it was just a practice for myself. If I was like nourishing myself, it just was like something that I wanted to do to feel good. And I think as the wellness industry has grown, it's become huge and crazy. and and now there's like a million things that we need to be doing. I mean, from like the cold plunges to the breath work to the yoga to the meditation to the journaling, the morning pages, the journaling at night, maybe some chanting, that would be good, some mantras, some affirmations, yeah, the green juice, the eat this and that and not this, but some people are saying eat this thing and not this thing, right? And like I mean, just diet alone is like a massive confusion of information, of people telling you what's healthy and what's not healthy. And, and now we have to plan our whole days and months according to our cycle. And so like that's like a whole other level of like organization. That's
Yeah.
and it's impossible. It's an absolutely impossible task to take care of yourself now based on the amount of information that's coming in. And then every time it's like, oh, you shouldn't sleep with your phone by the bed and you shouldn't be on social media and you shouldn't. I mean, those were just all the do things. I mean, if we look at all the don't do things, you know, you're not taking care of yourself if you're doing this and this and this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. How do you even get out of bed in the morning? You know, you have Mel Robbins saying you got to get out of bed in 5 seconds. And then you have other people saying you should lie in bed and like say a prayer to the good Lord. You know, it's like, where do you go?
So I
And
think
so I think all of this noise is just creating like a whole sort of undercurrent of never feeling like enough, never feeling like you're doing enough, never feeling good enough. And like whatever you're doing, you're probably doing it wrong. And so where does that leave you when it comes to taking care of yourself and self-care?
it all started for me with the diet industry because I was in the
Oh,
diet industry for years, and I thought I knew it all because I worked for a company that this is what they did. And then 2 years later, science said something else, and I'm like, but I thought it was this, and now you're telling me it's that. And it was, so I totally understand where you're going with that. It's what led me to actually develop the program that I have right now, which is this idea of capacity, because I think what you're talking about highlights something that's really missing is that self-care makes an assumption that there's something wrong with us.
mm-hmm.
And so we get fixated on I'm going to fix myself.
Yeah.
But the thing is that first of all, there's nothing wrong with us. We're not broken.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us haven't learned discernment. We haven't learned patience. We haven't learned to value ourselves. We haven't learned to have the capacity for introspection,
Yeah.
which is what we touched on earlier. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's sort of like when are you done with healing and just going to work with the wholeness that you are?
Yeah. So it's a conundrum for many of us for sure. And sometimes I think that we've moved so fast that we're just dealing with what we can see because that's easier. But going back to spiritual bypassing, we're kind of missing the point. We need to go a layer deeper.
Yeah, and we're creating like yeah, those check boxes like you say, like okay, check, I did my yoga, check, I did my meditation, check, I drank my green smoothie, check, I went for a walk, check, I right?
And you never say to yourself, but I still feel like shit.
Yeah, I mean underneath maybe unconsciously you do.
Well, unconsciously you do, but you don't recognize it, right? So that's what this whole conversation is about, guys. If you haven't tuned in to what we're saying here, is we can lose ourselves in the process of pretending that everything is okay because we're doing everything right, but still feel lousy underneath, still question. And going back to that beautiful description, there's a rub where you don't feel quite, something doesn't feel quite in alignment. You don't feel quite happy, or there's this anxiety is building up. And what I know is that women already have careers and family and responsibilities and relationships, and now they're trying to meditate perfectly, and I was one of those people, right? Or journal perfectly or heal perfectly, and somehow we're failing at that also. So what do you think the alternative is?
I think, I mean, you've touched upon it for sure in what you've said, like about building capacity. And I think some of that is really learning to tune in and figure out what nourishes you. Like, and maybe that looks like a little experiment and learning to trust yourself, learning to hear your intuition, hear your inner guidance, trust your own like energetic signature. And we all have different frequencies. We all have different, energetic signatures, but really understanding what yours is and what helps you. And also having the flexibility that it might change and it might shift. And what helps, what's been working might not be working anymore. And looking at what's working now. And I think, especially women, with our life cycles and our monthly cycles and our, different stages of living and life, our hormonal changes and shifts, we have big, big things that we go through over a lifetime. And it's not really practical to think that what worked when we're in our 20s is going to work in our 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. And it's really important to keep reassessing, keep checking in with yourself rather than listening to some expert or someone else, what works for someone else. I mean, take it in as maybe like an idea or a hint or a tip or something to try, but figure out what works for you and trust your own inner guidance. I think that's the most important thing, because nobody lives in your body but you.
So, so good. And of course, you're touching into the work that I do, right? We've got, I believe there's a trinity within us, the shadow queen and the inner critic and the divine guide. And what I love about that is recognizing that we actually have all the answers. Most of us don't know that because we have layers and layers of pain and living and life and drama and trauma and just trying to get by. But when we can sit still long enough and sort of peel back those layers, there actually is a wisdom, and the body knows, right? The body knows before the brain, always, right? Always. But you had said something powerful, and I want to move this conversation into leadership because I work with women leaders. And you said that you believe the world needs women leadership right now, but before that can happen, we need to heal the sister wound. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, wow, that's a that's a big one.
We got time.
Yeah, good. Okay. But yeah, 100%. I am like so fully committed to having women in leadership in this world. Our planet is crying for it. Our planet is breaking at the seams for women to start showing up in leadership and really taking control of the situation on all levels. And I'm so here for it. But what really we need to do in order for this to be successful and to truly, like, for us to truly rise, for, and women in leadership roles, to me, is good for everyone, including men. It's not just for the women, because if we heal this sister wound, which some people call the witch wound, or there's lots of different names for it, but really we've been so subjugated that it's in our minds, it's in our bodies, it's in our genes and our lineages and our memory, our ancestral memory, right? That, like, women don't have power. And so in order to have power as a woman, you have to, like, put other women down. You have to rise above them. And there's only one spot for one woman, and everyone else is going to be below. And so we've been taught, whether this generation or just ancestrally, that we need to be competitive. And I feel like that's what we need to do as women. And we need to really heal those parts of us inside of us that are judging and that are criticizing, that inner critic that's like judging ourselves, is like, oh, you're too fat, or you don't look great, or you're too old, or you're too young, or like, I don't know, we're judging ourselves about all this stuff that it doesn't really matter. But, like, be with our inner critic, because that inner critic is also being projected outside of us too. And so the more we're judging ourselves internally, the more we're also projecting it outwards to others. And so doing this healing work, or this deep sort of inner wholeness, coming into wholeness, where we stop judging ourselves about everything, helps us to stop judging others about everything that they're doing. And we need to come into support and into harmony, into collaborative roles rather than competitive roles, and lift each other up and celebrate each other. And really, like, not look at, if some woman gets something, it's taking something away from me.
I want to jump in here because there's such a strong, first of all, thank you, right? I feel the energy and the passion. I'm like, go, sister, go. But a couple of things stand out for me. Number one, this idea of honoring, because when we honor ourselves and our gifts, then it opens up, it builds the capacity to honor others. And that's how community is built, right? So I think part of one of the biggest components of healing is our willingness to honor ourselves, even if we don't understand ourselves, even if we don't like ourselves. We can still honor by giving ourselves grace. I'm not saying it's easy, but I love this idea of women primarily are build community, and there's strength in community. right?
Yes. And
So yeah.
women support families more. Women support like other women and like charities, and like women are naturally givers. Like we get our dopamine hits when we give things to other people. Men get their dopamine hits when they keep it for themselves. So
Okay, we're not going to
like
go down that path. We could, but we don't have time for that today. So listen, I just need, and just to sort of tie this all up as a in a bow, pretty bow, because this is the art of badassery, and you are some kind of badass. What I'm hearing from you, and what I really support, and for those of you listening, if this resonates, just let us know in the comments, is that regardless of where you are at in your journey, whether you call it self-care or growth or discovery or performance, take a moment to just sit and breathe and tune in and ask yourself, is this the real me? Am I pretending? Am I performing? How am I really feeling, for Christ's sakes? Because awareness is the start, but it's not the end, right? Awareness coupled with action is actually going to make a difference, whether it's to stand up in your community, stand up for yourself, or stand up, at work. We really do have this opportunity. And the biggest thread through today's conversation was really understanding that we may have fallen into the trap of bypassing, whether it's in our health, self-care, or in our spirituality. The invitation here really is to just take a moment and pause. What's one tip that you can share with the audience about how to do that? Because you and I do it all the time, but what would you say to the people that are listening? How can we take a moment to pause and really tune in to see where we fall on that spectrum of acceptance and or bypassing?
yeah, I think one of the things that like really is probably the work that you thread into how you work with your clients as well is really like catching the judgments. Like notice when you're judging yourself or judging someone else, and then doing that compassionate self-forgiveness work around the judgments, right? Like rather than saying, "Oh, I shouldn't be judging," now you're judging the judgments, which is just piling on the judgment,
Goes
right?
around and around, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But like, see, oh, there's the judgment. And then just say, I forgive myself for judging myself or judging this other person or leaving the misperception that things shouldn't be this way. And then tuning in and reconnecting to that inner, intuition, that inner guide, that inner, divine essence. And then say the truth is, and understand what the truth is. And this is a practice that comes from the University of Santa Monica. And it's just such a beautiful way of like reprogramming those patterns, those mental patterns in our minds and in our energetic field and our habits, because we're constantly judging ourselves and others in the world and the situation. And so the more we can start to catch it, forgive the judgment, because it's the judgment that creates the suffering and the pain and the problems, and then tune into the truth. And what's the truth? What's the real truth in this situation? The truth is always love, is always compassionate, it's always like really inclusive of the whole, and it feels good. I think importantly, it feels good. Judgment doesn't feel good. Judgment makes you feel crappy. Truth makes you feel like loved and whole and like in yourself and like able to expand your capacity to love others.
There's that beautiful word again, Harmony. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about you and connect with your work?
Yeah, please come on over to my website, harmonyslater.com, or find me on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official. I would love to connect with you.
That is awesome. Folks, thanks for joining us today on the Art of Badassery. Hope you enjoyed it. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you thought. And where are you at with this idea of pretending? All right, my name is Mahar. This has been the Art of Badassery. We'll see you next time. Take care. If this episode lit a fire in your soul or smacked you with some needed truth, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share it with another badass who's ready to rise. And if you're done second-guessing your intuition and want some clarity that cuts through the noise, book your free intuitive strategy reading with me now. No fluff, I promise, no BS, just soul-deep insight to help you move forward with power. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, stay bold, stay brilliant, and for the love of God, stay badass.